In the criminal justice system, there are two kinds of police officers, the good ones you see on TV, and the real ones in real life out to screw you over. These are their motherfucking stories.
You know what this precinct could use, Belinsky?
Hell if I know, O'Donnell. You tell me.
A margarita machine.
Hell's yes.
Can you imagine coming off a long shift, and before you punch out, you could down a slushy cold ginger raspberry or a tropical frozen mango?
I'm partial to the jalapeno grapefruit myself. We should ask the chief to get one for the whole station.
Nah, he'll just say it's not in the budget.
Then we do a fundraiser. Come up with the money ourselves.
What kind of a fundraiser?
How about a Blue Lives Matter bake sale?
You know none of us know our way around an oven.
A car wash, maybe?
We're not Rolls-Royce. We're not the type to keep those rags and machines humming.
Well then, you think of something.
I got it. We go on patrol. We look for mostly black and Hispanic drivers with out-of-state plates. We pull them over, search their vehicle, and if we find any cash, we seize that as possible drug money. We put that money in the budget, and then we requisition a margarita machine as a team-building and morale-boosting expenditure.
That's genius, O'Donnell. I think you just found our lost shaker of salt.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Super Show with me, your host, Super Sister. In September 2024, Netflix released an action/revenge thriller called Rebel Ridge, a movie about an African-American ex-Marine who finds himself in violent conflict with a corrupt small-town police force. The major corruption involves the police chief and his boys in blue exploiting a legal maneuver called civil asset forfeiture, which allows cops to unjustly seize the property of innocent civilians. Even though the movie is not based on any individual true story, the elements of the plot are ripped straight out of national headlines involving what some term policing for profit. Police are supposed to target drug kingpins and cartel members in order to cripple their criminal organizations by seizing their cash and ill-gotten gains. But all too often, police and federal agencies aim their seizure efforts at ordinary and often innocent people who have little to zero connection with illegal drugs. And the police then use the cash and profits from the sale of seized property to fund their operating budget. And in a large number of these cases, the persons whose property is taken is not convicted of a crime, and sometimes they are not even charged. So how did we get to what amounts to literal highway robbery by law enforcement? For a brief history of civil asset forfeiture, we turn to our junior correspondent, Gamma Girl.
The origins of civil asset forfeiture can be traced to medieval England, when the British Crown adopted the practice of charging pieces of property with a crime. According to the 10th Amendment Center.com, if a person was killed by an object or weapon, that item was essentially charged with murder and forfeited to the British Crown. Initially, the item was sold, and the money received was given to charitable organizations. Eventually, though, the monarchy began keeping the money for itself, and thus the very dangerous precedent of civil asset forfeiture was set, and it would later greatly impact the American founding. When the U.S. was still a British colony, England passed the Navigation Act of 1600, which forced colony ships to go through British checkpoints that inspected the ship's cargo. If British inspectors deemed the ship's operators were going against the Navigation Act, they would be branded as smugglers and pirates, and thus the Crown could seize not only the ship and its cargo, but also the horse and carts that were used to load the cargo onto the ship. And if ship owners tried to prove their innocence, that claim didn't hold up in court for purposes of reclaiming their property, since the British charged the property with a crime, not the property owners.
See, now that's some bullshit.
After the American Revolution, the newly formed U.S. government would adopt the practices of the Navigation Act during the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, and during Prohibition. But civil asset forfeiture as we know it today got its strong sea legs back in 1984, when Congress, fresh off its renewed war on drugs from the Nixon years, passed the Comprehensive Crime Control Act, which allowed law enforcement to seize property from those suspected of trafficking in illegal drugs. This 1984 law also allowed the federal government to share up to 80% of the proceeds from seized assets with local and state agencies, granting local cops and district attorneys access to a lucrative stream of income. Essentially, this new law gave a huge incentive to any police agency to legally commit highway robbery.
There are many who feel that civil asset forfeiture is a necessary tool to stop the drug trade, but few people actually stop to ask a fundamental question. Why are certain drugs illegal in the first place?
It's a good question.
There was a time in the US that drugs such as opium, cocaine, and cannabis were available for purchase at the corner pharmacy. So what happened? To answer this question, we turn to our special correspondent, Teacher Man.
If we assume that the US government made certain drugs illegal because some drugs are harmful to the human body, then why aren't the two drugs that kill the most people annually, nicotine and alcohol, perfectly legal and regulated? The answer is that just as asset forfeiture in medieval England and colonial America soon morphed from paying for justice to paying for government salaries and budgets, laws that criminalize certain drugs were never made to protect the people.
No, it sure wasn't.
Instead, they were passed to control and exploit particular minorities. In the early 1900s, opium that was used for smoking, a habit favored by Chinese immigrants, was banned in the US, especially in California, not because of the dangers of the drug, but because of racist attitudes against the Chinese. Spurred by racist propaganda that black men high on cocaine would go on marksman-like shooting rampages, that they could not be killed with ordinary bullets, and that they would rape the first white woman they stumbled upon, politicians moved to outlaw cocaine in 1914, a drug many African American dock workers ingested to give them energy needed for backbreaking work. Mexicans were associated with smoking marijuana, and because of racial animosity and the fear of them taking jobs from whites, politicians made cannabis illegal in 1937. Criminalizing drugs and civil asset forfeiture are close cousins in that both are often used to injure minorities and poor people under the guise of forging a better America, when in actuality, they are outlets for racism and quick profit.
The movie Rebel Ridge features a character who is a combination of movie characters such as Rambo and Jack Reacher. So in Hollywood fashion, he has a set of special skills that allow him to open several cans of beat that ass on the corrupt sheriff and his deputies. But life is not a Hollywood action flick, and the real-life victims of these seizures are often left with little recourse when law enforcement robs them of their property. We now turn to our special correspondent, Bombay, for a look at some of the most egregious cases, and our senior correspondent, Maddie Green, will take out his calculator and reveal how much money has been collected and where it's all going.
Local and state police, the DEA, ICE, TSA, and Homeland Security all cast a wide net in their so-called fight against drugs while patrolling our nation's roadways and airports. A retired engineer named Terry Rowlin had his life savings of $82,000 seized from his daughter, whom he had entrusted to deposit the cash into a new banking account in Boston. His daughter, Rebecca Brown, never made it onto her flight because the TSA held her bag after screening it, and they turned the money over to the DEA, who kept the funds without charging Brown or arresting her.
That's robbery.
According to the Atlanta Black Star, food cart owner Crystal Starling had her apartment raided by Rochester police in October 2020 because her then-boyfriend was suspected of drug dealing. However, police never cited Starling with any offences, but even after her boyfriend was acquitted, authorities kept the $8,040 they seized, money she says she was saving up for a food truck.
Yeah, that's messed up.
The Nevada Highway Patrol stopped former Marine veteran Stephen Lara for following too closely to the vehicle in front of him. After questioning him about weapons or drugs, the officers asked Lara if he had any large amounts of cash. Lara told them that he was in fact carrying a large amount of currency, with receipts and pay stubs to prove that the money was legally obtained. But despite not finding any drugs or weapons in Lara's car, the officers took his $87,000 in savings, saying that despite the evidence, they suspected the money to be connected with drugs. Lara was not charged with a crime, nor arrested. These scenarios are on wash, rinse and repeat all over the nation, often with matching scripts. Officers pull over drivers for real or invented minor traffic violations, start a friendly chat with the motorist, and then casually ask the driver if they are carrying illegal drugs or weapons or large amounts of cash. The motorist, feeling they have nothing to hide, consent to a search, and when the police find the cash, they seize that money, even if the bank receipt is notarized by Jesus Christ himself. The motorist is not arrested or charged with a crime, but the money is. This process is illustrated in the film Rebel Ridge.
So you sure they took all your money?
I mean, I got what's in my wallet.
Thanks, Cindy. Called civil asset forfeiture.
And it's legal?
Well, law. Supposed to help feds fight cartels.
Right, but they didn't find any drugs, so...
All they need is suspicion, because the seizure isn't tied to any criminal charges. And here's where it gets real murky. Chief gets to keep the proceeds. He needs it for discretionary funds, whatever that means. Someone in permits told me he bought a $900 margarita machine for Cinco de Mayo.
Right, so never mind the share what you remember this due process.
Doesn't matter. It's the 5th and 14th. But when they bring this case, you won't even be named. It's literally gonna read, how much money was it again?
$36K.
It'll read the Township of Shelby Springs versus $36,000 because your property has no civil rights.
Those who engage in civil asset forfeiture are more interested in profits than they are in taking drugs off the streets or jailing cartel members.
It's real sad that so many liberals are actually seeking to curb the power of civil asset forfeiture. Those beta males and abortion-having lesbians are too naive to realize that the Mexican cartels cross our borders daily with 18-wheelers packed to the max with drug money. We need this tool of law enforcement to stop Mexican money laundering. If we don't make these stops and seizures, then the cartels win.
But Chief Skinner, the vehicle you stopped yesterday wasn't an 18-wheeler. It was a Nissan Pathfinder that belonged to a 62-year-old Marine veteran who claims he was traveling with over $20,000 in cash to buy a fishing boat. Yet you took his savings and impounded his car. And your jurisdiction is in Point Roberts, Washington, a town that's over 1,400 miles from the Mexican border.
Well, you know what they say. Give the cartels an inch, and they'll take a mile, and another mile, and another mile, till they're way up to 1,400. Now, excuse me. Told my deputies I'd be back at the station after lunch to help them count a stack of Benjamins.
Drug pipelines on our highways are divided into two sections: the lane where the drugs are trafficked, and the lane where the drug money is transported. Law enforcement overwhelmingly police the money lane, which reveals their true priority. According to the Institute for Justice, over the past 20 years, federal, state, and local agencies have collected over $68.8 billion in assets, and many researchers think that number is underreported.
Yeah, probably is.
The seized money goes to police salaries, overtime, offices and garages, weapons, police vehicles, and other colorful expenses. Some eye-raising examples include the following. A district attorney in Georgia used asset forfeiture funds to buy steaks, alcohol, and CeeLo Green concert tickets. Another DA in Texas spent over $500 on tequila, rum, beer kegs, and a margarita machine. Yes, that really happened. Another Texas DA paid $27,000 on a 6-day law conference in Hawaii. A sheriff in Georgia purchased a $90,000 Dodge Viper for his department's DARE program, and he shelled out $35,000 for inmates to build him a party house. And a Michigan Vice Squad spent $40,000 on drugs and prostitutes. Money well spent, right?
Although the abuse from civil asset forfeiture is a stain all across the nation, with a few states as exceptions, there are those in Congress on both sides of the aisle who think this blatantly unconstitutional action needs to be massively reformed. To tell us about congressional action to combat this robbery under the color of law, we turn to our senior correspondent, Super Black Brother Man III.
Conservatives, libertarians, and progressives have all found common ground over ending the abuses associated with property seizures for suspected drug activity. House Bill 1525, called the Fifth Amendment Integrity Restoration Act, or the FAIR Act, is a bipartisan bill that would broadly overhaul federal civil asset forfeiture laws. According to Institute for Justice, if H.R. 1525 is passed, victims would have fair access to courts. Currently, up to 98.6% of property seized by federal agencies is forfeited by bureaucrats in those administrative agencies outside the court. The FAIR Act eliminates administrative forfeiture, ensuring that only federal courts, not administrative administrative agencies can order civil forfeitures to the federal government. The FAIR Act further provides for access to counsel for those seeking return of their property.
Give me back my money.
Seized funds would no longer go to the Department of Justice and its law enforcement agencies, but rather the money would go to the U.S. Treasury and the General Fund, taking out the profit incentive from federal agents. The FAIR Act would also end the Equitable Sharing Program, so state and local governments could no longer skirt more restrictive state laws on asset forfeiture. As things stand now, victims are guilty until proved innocent. That is, they have to prove that their money or property isn't involved with illegal drugs in order to get it back. And the process is so daunting and expensive that many people walk away and let the government keep their property. The FAIR Act reverses the burden of proof on the government. And finally, the act protects innocent owners from forfeiture. If their property is used by another person in relation to a crime, they will be able to recover their seized property by showing they did all they reasonably could to protect against any unlawful use by that third party. So just because a grandson sold meth on his grandmother's porch, the government won't be able to automatically seize her house, rendering her homeless.
Most of us don't have special ass-kicking skills like Terry Richmond, the protagonist in Rebel Ridge. But we can fight back against this ongoing tyranny. We can call our congressperson and ask them to support the FAIR Act. You can write your state legislature and ask them to end civil asset forfeiture like New Mexico did, and change the process to criminal asset forfeiture, meaning you have to be charged and convicted of a crime to have your property seized. And like New Mexico, you can lobby lawmakers to cut off the money spigot to law enforcement, sending profits from seizures to the general fund and not to the police or the DA and their CeeLo green tickets. The Constitution says we should be free from illegal seizures and searches without probable cause and a warrant, and it's high time we drown the powers of these badge-carrying road pirates.